My parents always told me that I could do anything. As I've grown up, there was moments of unwinding that, of like realizing your own humanity.
Today's guest is Mickey Meyer, LA-based Oscar-winning producer and former network president at Group 9 Studios. As a professional, Mickey was one of the forerunners when YouTube and the creator movement disrupted the media business. He has worked with stars such as Sarah Silverman and Michael Cera, and he produced the Oscar-winning short film Two Distant Strangers for Netflix. What makes me excited about Mickey is his special ability to show up as a leader. I admire his leadership across his roles as a president of a company with a 200 million turnover and a family man and a father of two. For me, it remains a mystery from where on earth he still gets his drive to also be a beloved leader and coach of a Little League baseball team. My name is Risto Kuulasmaa and I'm your host at Talks of Imperfection, where we meet nearly perfect people revealing their imperfections. Our intention is to create an encounter where we learn and get inspired about what kind of role imperfection plays in our private and professional lives. Welcome to the show.
I have a moment, like a more grandiose encounter with perfection that I think has set the tone for a lot of my life. You know, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. In that my parents always told me that I could do anything. My mom was very, very, a very positive person that imbued in me this feeling of like, you can be whatever you want to be. And a lot of praise, and especially I was the eldest son, a lot of like, I think for them the what's the apple in their eye kind of feeling of you're great, you're so good at everything you do, and you're so I played baseball, and there's like, oh my God, you're such a great baseball player. You played hockey, you're doing so great. There's so much positive belief that it was a feeling of like, you're perfect, you are amazing, you're so great. And I think for me, as I've grown up, there was moments of unwinding that, of like realizing your own humanity. And then also maybe another layer deeper of realizing that that's okay, because there's a moment of like, okay, maybe I'm not what I thought my parents thought that I was, or who they thought that I was, and trying to understand what other people thought I was, and then trying to understand what I thought I was, and understanding what I am, have all been different layers kind of along this journey. But I think as far as like my first real, moment of interaction with the idea of perfectionism was like, oh, I am perfect. I'm everything. I'm so good at everything. And just this, very narcissistic, caption of my life. And what's been interesting too, as I've grown up and like starting to unwind this even for my own kids, is I think a lot of that was reinforced in media, was just seeing myself as the main character in every single thing that I watched. I'm blonde-haired, blue-eyed little white boy watching, all these movies and shows where like that's the main character. You've got Zach Morris in Saved by the Bell, or you had, like Kevin McAllister in Home Alone, and like all these iconic movies. It's always like that guy. Maybe his hair's a little bit different, or maybe his eye color's a little bit different, but like for the most part, like everybody that I saw that looked like me was the main character in every movie. And so yeah, of course, which is I think somewhat natural, is like you grow up as a kid viewing yourself as the center of the universe. And that was my own, I guess, definition of perfection from the get, was like, oh, that's like, I am perfect. And unwinding that to be like, no, I'm flawed. I'm very flawed. Here's how I'm flawed. And then also that other layer of like, it's okay to be flawed.
Let's fast forward. How it felt to hold the Oscar trophy in your hands?
Unbelievable. I mean, a very sobering moment for sure, where I went through a weird mental, roller coaster of emotions leading up to that moment, and then coming out of that moment that still it's a career aspiration, right? You put that on your dream board as like, I hope I hit this mark one day, and that you're given that sense of validation. And I'm still very young in my career. This was the first film really that I made. I mean, I've made other short films, and I've made a lot of content and produced TV and all this stuff, but this is the first time that I'd ever entered something into, or that we had ever entered something into an Oscar race. And even just that, like they say it's cliche, but it's like even just getting on the short list was like oh my God, this is an unbelievable feeling. And then you get nominated, and it's like, oh my God, we can now say that we're Oscar nominated producers and Oscar nominated, writers and whatever. And then you have that moment where it happens, and it was major sense of validation. But then to have that, I'm an Oscar winning producer in front of your name, it changes your life forever.
Can you describe the exact moment when you touched the trophy?
I can, but I think that the moment almost right before may be more meaningful, because I know that this was within the questions that you have laid out was what's the closest you felt to perfection, and it was that moment for me. So how it worked, because this happened in the COVID year, or I guess the second COVID year for the Academy. But I nobody was allowed to go to the ceremony other than you have two people that are allowed to go, and so it's the writer director combo of Trayvon Free and Martin Desmond Rowe, who ultimately were going to go. And then everybody else every film had like their own watch parties, and you'd go, and it's all the other producers and cast and who's financiers, whoever's been supporting the project, and their significant other, spouses, whatever, get together, watch the screening together. And I was supposed to go to it, but I had a Little League game scheduled at the same time that I was a manager of my older son's team. It was like a decently important game too, and I don't know why I made the decision. I guess just because my maybe priorities are hopefully right, or maybe an out of skew. But like I decided to manage the game. The game ended. And then the idea was I was going to come home because the award was later in the catalog, or later in the things to be announced, and I would come home, change, and then go to the watch party. And it just so happened that like right when the game finished, I got a text that said like, "Hey, we're about to be announced," and they moved it up. And so because they don't, ahead of the ceremony, they don't tell you when the things are going to be announced. There's like they're very anti that, and so it's like, you have your connections, you have your PR contacts that say like, hey, it might be here, it might be there. And so we thought it was going to be at the end, but you had no idea. And so we get the text, hey, it's next up. We boogied home from here, and my whole family just happened to be with me, on that day. And so we walked in, turned it on, and they said, yeah, next up, this is the award. And everybody kind of gathered around the TV to watch it, and it got announced. And yeah, that was it. Like that was the most perfect moment I think I'll ever have in my life, of just like getting this crazy recognition for something that I've worked so hard for in so many different ways, that just the universe kind of rewarded me with this moment, and rewarded everybody with the moment. But like, that feeling, to have that moment surrounded by my family, to be able to watch it turn with my boys, two younger boys who are both like jumping up and down, and their cousins who are there, or my nieces and nephews who feel like they're my own children at times, and have my wife there and my parents there, and just have, champagne. And so that celebration, that moment was unlike anything I think I'll ever be able to experience for the rest of my life, or have experienced up until then. And so, yeah, later then that night went to the watch party, and Martin and Trayvon had like their entrance into the party shortly after I got there, and I got to hold it. But it's in a sea of people, with everybody trying to get their piece of that action and trying to feel like they're a part of it. And there was definitely like a stillness to being able to hold it there. And then we went out and partied later that night, as you do. And I got to spend more time with it and just kind of like hold it and sit with it. And it was just like, it's such a dumb thing. because it's a piece of metal, and it's, you care so much about this thing, and have such aspirations and so many, reflections about it. And so you're staring at it, realizing the insanity of it, while also feeling, the highest highs that you've ever felt, on a career level, that this is part of your journey now. And so, yeah, I mean, like, I'd say it's, it's a hunk of metal, but it's not. It symbolizes so much, and so it's just that like physical manifestation of that symbolism that, I definitely, I'm grabbing my hand. You can't see how this is a podcast, but it's like I'm grabbing my hand as if I'm holding it right now, and so, that was the moment.
Cool. Walk us through the career that ended to that moment and is continuing, obviously. Could you walk us through your career and reflect a bit around the perfection and imperfection on the way?
Really. I think, so when I first got, my first introductions into entertainment came so much through just like living in a small town, watching movies and TV and being in awe of it. And that was my escape. That was my, this is a world outside of my life. And I, played a lot of sports. That was my day one. This is what I want to do. And when I realized that was not maybe in the cards for me, entertainment was my happy. And I had always come to this, idea in my head of that's, if you find the thing that you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And so I was like, okay, well, this is what I want to dedicate my life to. I do love entertainment. I want to be a part of that, and I want to help make. And I don't think I really even knew what that meant yet. And so I had an internship first when I had gone to school in Colorado, wanted to get into the entertainment industry. I came out for the summer for an internship on The West Wing, a TV show, and worked that with the idea of okay, I'm going to go back to school. Decided that I fell in love with California, didn't want to leave California, and was kind of a moment of okay, if I'm going to do this, this is it. I got an entrance into it. They had offered me a job as a PA, and so I stayed on as a PA and production assistant. And so I decided to then go to community college, and even that was, I'll say, checking back to the perfection piece of it was that was a really hard decision for me because, you're chasing this idea of what perfection has been built into you of I go to high school, I graduate, I go to college, I graduate, and then I get a job. And leaving a prestigious college to then go to a community college that anybody can get into was this moment of am I really going to do this? Am I okay? And I don't know why it didn't really there was an am I really going to do this, but it almost never was a question. It was no, this is what I want to do, and this is what I think will work, and everything is going to work out fine. I just had that belief, I guess. And I went to Santa Monica College and busted my butt there, continued working on The West Wing, and then wanted to transfer into USC because it was great in film and TV, and if I wanted to do entertainment, that's where I wanted to learn. And so I applied to all these schools and got in a bunch of different places, was about to go to UCSB, about to go to UC Irvine, or I don't even remember what some of these other schools were, and got into USC last of all of them. Went there, stopped working on The West Wing, met at USC a group of comedians and that had a sketch group called Good Neighbor, started kind of working with them, was in the theater school, had a lot of talented acting friends, which is kind of what got me into producing and started making me realize okay, I can help you. I understand some of the mechanics of this because of the internship and the production stuff. And I was starting to work my way up the ladder on the producing side, and it was terrible. It was, work, it never, what is what's the expression I just said is find the thing you love, you'll never work a day in your life. It was that was, had never been felt more wrong because I was this is nothing but work and I hate all of this. And it was nothing glamorous. You're a PA. It was hey, somebody that, a homeless person just pooped in the alley over there. We need you to go pick it up. And it was dear mom, Hollywood's great. This is not what I imagined at all, but it was work and it was in the entertainment industry. So I was I guess this is what it is. And then on the parallel path to that, the sketch comedy group that I've been working with, Good Neighbor, had met this guy, Danny Zappin, who was starting to make YouTube videos. And I went and starting to make, not YouTube videos, he's starting to build a company around making YouTube videos. And I went to shoot one of these videos with them just because I had a camera that I think that they loved, and they needed someone to come help them. I went and shot a video that was the first ever Epic Rap Battles of History, and that kind of blew up. And it was this very eye-opening moment of this is really fun. Like I came and made this video, and it was just like kids playing around, and we shot it with like a work light and green cloth that was bought at a fabric store, not green screen or anything like that. And that version of entertainment was so much more enjoyable than the hey, we need coffee, can you go and grab it? That it was like, this is, even though this is probably gonna be less money, this is way more interesting. And teamed into Maker, and when you talk about things being perfect, it was the opposite, right? It was there was nothing that was being done right other than having fun. That was there, and that was the core of so much of it. The ambition was there. Danny Zappin, who founded it, had great vision for it. But when it came to executing at a layer of this is how I want, how a production, which is typically very if you're doing it at a higher budget levels, very, very buttoned up, overly thought out, there's no risk involved in it. There is you're thinking about what meals you're going to buy, 5 days prior to ordering lunch for people. It's just not, there's no risk involved. Whereas this was flying by the seat of your pants, and no ability to put forth into anything as much as just trying to keep up with the pace of what the internet was starting to provide.
And what year was this?
This is 2000. Oh man, 2008. 2009, somewhere in there, maybe 2010 even. This is Maker started right after the partnership program in 2006 started for YouTube, and so it was probably shortly after that Maker Studios really started to form. And yeah.
And can you describe those days? Because some of the listeners are not that educated about the creator movement and the rise of the YouTubers. Can you kind of describe what was going on back in that time?
Yeah, so that time was just, it felt so just experimental, it felt like there was just so much happening that felt in so many ways organic, but also just felt like pure resistance to, let's not do things the way that they've been done because something's not working. It felt, if you were on the outside looking in from how relationships had been formed, it was an impossible thought that you could come up with a show idea and pitch it and get it sold. That was just not, there was zero possibility for you to be creative in moment one. You could maybe go join a writer's room or something and work your way into it, and find yourself as a 50-year-old later on down the line was kind of the allure that you might be able to create something. But there's no financing available. There's not these networks and TV networks, they had established buyers that or established sellers that they were buying from the same people over and over and over again as opposed to buying from someone new. So why would they trust you? And that idea of a talent getting somehow discovered was more on the acting side than the producing or the filmmaking side, unless you could do the impossible. So that feeling that those early days was almost just a rejection of that notion of no, we want to make whatever we want to make. I don't want to, if I'm selling you a comedy, I don't want you to tell me that the blue chair is funnier than the green chair. I want to be able to decide what's funniest. I want to make it the way that I want to make it. And so that was what I think brought so many people into that moment of just we're going to just figure it out. And Danny and the Maker team did. They took a stab at we think that this is how it's going to work, and much just coincided with how YouTube was evolving, and the fact that they were starting to pay out money meant we can make something. It's not going to be Game of Thrones, but we can go put this money to make a thing that we want to make. And that was all we needed to then just grow that piece of it.
And then you moved forward with the Maker when Sarah Silverman came to the picture.
Yeah, so I was at Maker for a while. Maker went from what was 8 employees to 300 seemingly overnight over the course of, I think, 2 years, and took on investment money. And what I fell in love with About Maker, and that autonomy started to shift a little bit in just the need of growing a business. And at the time, the MCN business model was, it became a game of quantity less than quality, which was antithetical to what I really wanted to do. And so I left Maker when I met this guy, Daniel Kellison, who had started to form Jash really off of a mandate from YouTube where they wanted more original programming. They wanted some celebrity names. They wanted other genres to entice advertisers. And so Daniel found me by kind of the grace of the universe and said he needed someone that understood how YouTube worked. And so brought me in early days, as well as our other co-founder, Doug DeLuca, who really was the first one that YouTube reached out to. And Daniel had gone out and tried to put together a group of comedians that would find what we were doing interesting. And so he, I think, started with Sarah. Sarah had the same, was represented by the same manager as Michael Cera, who then had the same agent as Tim and Eric. And then Reggie was kind of the one that they all unanimously were like, hey, we should bring Reggie into this mix. He had a following, but not like the following that he has now. And we formed Jash, and Jash was its own crazy roller coaster, and we did so much and won, Cannes Lions and won Sundance, and I got to work with the Obama administration and help them to understand how influencers and that the YouTube community worked. And the idea in so many ways was to offer that autonomy that I think appealed to me in the early days and appealed to Daniel about the internet, and offered that studio system and autonomy to comedians because they were probably the most impacted by, hey, green chair's funnier than blue chair. And like comedy, if it's done right and done to its best ability, is truth. And so the less you can water down that truth, the better, in my opinion. And so that's kind of where Jash generated from. And then Jash, about 5 years into it, we were out raising a Series B. We're talking with Group 9, and they said, hey, we'd like to acquire you instead of invest in you. And we decided to go that path. And so about 5 years ago now.
And what kind of role you took at Group 9?
Yeah, so within Group 9 now, I oversee all of our original programming, all of our studio efforts, and the president of Group 9 Studios, and basically everything that, my focus as I came in was we need to build out revenue that was not ad sales. And so, I helped to establish relationships when it came to platforms and, how to capitalize on building YouTube audience and what that meant, and how to look at, investing against intellectual property. We started out, the podcasting business and did kind of our own R&D effort around consumer products and what that might mean, and how we could start getting affiliate style relationships, and what brand licensing meant and things like that, and what original programming meant, and how we should think about that, and what those types of margins are versus what we want to build long term, and then what is that value on intellectual property and in our library and licensing that library out. And it's grown leaps and bounds. I think it was like $100,000 a year, business when we first started, and it's grown, very significantly since then. And then we just recently merged with Fox Media, who has a treasure trove of amazing brands as well. Group 9 has The Dodo, and now this, and Seeker, and Thrillist, and Pop Sugar, and Jash obviously as well, and then has merged with Vox as Vox, and Eater, and The Verge, and its own trove of brands. And the idea is just, hey, scale. We need that quantity. Here comes that word again.
Let's talk about leadership. How you see yourself as a leader? What kind of leadership style you are practicing?
Yeah, it took me a while to understand what being a leader meant, because when I first came into this, my aspiration was never business. It's like we were talking about it before, like, I'm going to make the decision, get involved in entertainment. It was, I had never gone to business school. I'd never had a desire to like raise money for a company or anything like that. I kind of happened into it as a means to an ends. It was, I want to support my friends who are artists and creators, and that's what I enjoy. So I need to understand how this business works so that I can then help them to navigate it. And that was really like early YouTube maker days. And then I found an enjoyment for it. I found an enjoyment for like systemizing things, and then ultimately for managing people, and managing in my best, version of it, or what I feel is the best version of management is support, is just helping people to unlock their potential, helping them to understand how they can join with other people to accomplish a shared goal. And it's taken a long time to get to that, because I think when I first started it was like, okay, well, I know I want to be a good person, and I don't want to be a bad boss. I don't want to be the person you see, in cartoons that is like yelling at people and any of that. And so it was like a little bit of unwinding that idea of like a boss is someone who yells, and a boss is someone who is like saying yes or no to people, and starting to unlock that idea that like, no, a boss is the person that helps you to unlock what is possible in your life. I have this interview question that I love, that is, what would you do with $5 million? And it always takes people off guard, because, it's an interview and people don't, you're expecting the like, how well do you do Excel question. And it's my favorite one to ask, because you get the best answers. And sometimes people definitely like will give you the answer they think that you need to hear, but be honest. It's like if you're smart, you're honest in that moment, because I've gotten answers that are like, oh, I would love to be a chef, or like I would do nothing but travel the world, or I would I would create this thing, or I would do that thing. And if that answer doesn't line up with the job that I'm trying to find, and I'm not going to be able to help you do that thing, this is going to be terrible for you. Like, you're going to come in and this isn't that thing that brings you happiness. And I'm going to be asking you to do something that like helps everybody else and helps this team. And it's going to be consistently at conflict with what you enjoy. Like that idea of a manager telling you to do a thing because it's what needs to be checked as a box is just such an arcane way to look at it.
And what's your imperfection as a leader that you are working on?
I think my imperfection is, I'm still perfect, so don't, get that wrong. No, I think my imperfection is maybe an attention to details, and at the same time, like I find so much more beauty and productivity in not getting so far in the weeds that you would ever, compromise someone else's vision. And so like that perfection for me comes in, and that like attention to details comes in for something that is like a project that I specifically own, that I have a vision for. But when it comes to other people's projects, like I don't look as under the microscope as maybe I should sometimes to catch something that, might help them. But it's also, I think it's kind of give and take, right? It's like that happens in a moment too, where if I had that attention to detail about something so much so that I'm then suggesting things to you that are complicating what it is that you're trying to create, or challenging you in ways that, are going to frustrate and get to the point where it's like, you're focusing on the wrong things versus focusing on kind of the more grandiose picture of things. It's a give and a take, I guess.
And if you look back the path from creator to leader, from creator to cameraman to president of a big company, what has been the biggest learnings on the way?
I think the biggest learnings has been on that management piece. I think there's still, I credit very much my parents and my upbringing and the privilege that I had growing up, that like I still believe I can do anything. And that is, it's an overwhelming piece at times, but I'd say the biggest, double-edged sword here is like the biggest block to you being able to do anything you want to do, and the biggest tool to being able to do anything you want to do is other people. And if you can, find the way to interact with other people in a way that is not just beneficial for you, that is a tool that you can use in so many ways for good, right? Like it removes, hopefully, you know, if you're doing it right, I think you're removing the transactional nature of like, hey, you can help me to do this thing, and, you know, tit for tat, now I owe you a favor later on, as much as like, hey, this is a thing we both care about. Like, let's find the way to use what we both have in our arsenal to go figure it out and get it done. And that for me, like in this entire journey, is something that I take a lot of pride in, and I hold very dear to, and I'm always maybe self-conscious of too, of like, I don't want to do something with you if I'm forcing you to do it, you know, like, yeah, there's moments where I need a favor for sure. Everybody has that moment. But like when it comes to larger collaborations, it's like, it's so much easier to go about things in that way, as opposed to, I'm going to pay you money to do a thing. And like, that's the only way that we can work together. You know, I don't know.
What's your take on success? What does success mean to you?
Success is, oh man, it is, I say that, you know, I went on this mental roller coaster after the Oscar, and I think that I asked myself this question a lot, and I still ask myself this question a lot, just because that was, you know, that was associated with a version of success for me that, like, okay, I've now achieved this thing. What's next? Like, what, am I happy? Am I not happy? Like, what did this do for me? Is this success? And, you know, I think success for me is that support, and like finding things that I believe in, that I'm able to support and create meaningful change. So like one thing in particular right now that spawned part of my involvement in that film, Two Dozen Strangers, was I've used my skill set now across a lot of this stuff for the biggest, you know, influencers in the world, for the biggest, you know, comedians in the world, for, you know, the biggest advertisers in the world, corporations in the world, for, you know, the largest governments in the world, in the United States. And it came to this moment of like, okay, I've been at Group 9 for a minute. What do I want to do? Like, what do I want to put my skill set behind? Because I've used it for everybody else, but I haven't used it for myself. And I've got my two little boys, and my younger son, Knox, looks just like me. He's blonde-haired, blue-eyed little white boy, by all appearances. And my older son, Logan, looks more like my wife, who's Ecuadorian and has brown skin, brown hair, brown eyes. And, you know, we watch movies pretty religiously every night, and obviously watch a lot of content, but movies in particular. And it was a very eye-opening thing for me that there's a lot of movies for one of my kids and not a lot for the other. And especially during COVID, Logan started to go through a little bit of an identity crisis, and, you know, we ended up reading a lot of books, and that helped. And I think that he's a great reader, and I think that although he procrastinates like crazy, and half the time I'm like, hey, finish your book, come on. But anyways, that piece of how things are operating, or how they've been operating, where we've started to address representation at more of an adult level, but for kids it still doesn't exist in that way yet. And being able to see all of your possibilities in the same way that I was afforded, it has become a large thing for me. And so that idea of building empathy through representation in whatever I do, it has really become kind of my mission now. And so I'd say, like, success for me as it exists today might change from how it exists for me in 5 years, but is like, how can I meaningfully contribute to that on a regular basis? And if it's either as a producer or just putting projects together, or finding a kind of more systematized way to address it that appeals to, you know, capitalism so that it will stick. That's where I'm currently defining success, you know, on a career level. I think on a personal level, it is, you know, do I get to spend time with my family? Are they happy? And are they, you know, am I supporting them in the way that they need to be supported? Just like a manager's like, am I supporting my oldest son to find the things that he loves that aren't necessarily the things that I love? Am I supporting my younger son to find the things that he loves that aren't necessarily the things that I love? Am I supporting my wife so that she's not feeling like, you know, an appendage to me or to our boys, so that she's finding her version of happiness and things that challenge her, you know, along the way?
What's the most perfect sketch out there?
Perfect sketch, like comedy sketch? Oh man, I am a huge fan of Invisible Dinner by Good Neighbor. That's a great one. There's so many. SNL has done so many. That Good Neighbor sketch group went on and has now been on SNL for a long time. And there's so many that came from within that. I mean, obviously, like I loved all the Lonely Island stuff. There's maybe a crass one, but like Jizz in My Pants cracks me up every single time. I love, we did a short that is, I don't know if you'd qualify it as a sketch, that was based on an article written by Aaron Blair, called How to Lose Weight in 4 Easy Steps. And it's that, I don't want to spoil it too much, but it's that one is one of my favorites. I don't know what it's called. There's another one that's done by Good Neighbor. Toast is a great one. Toast is probably my favorite one. Toast is, 3 guys, Kyle, Nick, and Beck, of Good Neighbor, who are about to go out on a night to drink, and they agree that they're going to, do a toast before they go out. And the toast just kind of keeps building and building and building throughout the sketch until there's a funny button at the end of it as well. But it just keeps getting to more and more ludicrous machinations of what a toast could be. So
cool. Can you describe where we are at this very moment and what kind of role Little League plays for you?
Yeah, Little League is such an interesting thing when it comes to this concept of perfection. We're in an announcer's booth for Little League is where we're recording this. And Little League baseball is a beautiful sport to me. And there's a lot of sports, that I've played in my life. Baseball has this kind of beautiful aspect to it where the best baseball players in the world fail at the plate 7 out of 10 times. And, if you're a pitcher, people are going to hit the ball. Like it's an impossibility. It's a very rare thing to be able to throw a pitch where, pitch in a game where there's no one hitting it, no hitter. So, for me, Little League has this special place in that you're teaching kids how to fail. And you're, as a perfectionist or as someone who's trying to find that, that idea of perfection, it is a reminder that you'll never, perfect can't exist where there is no failure. There has to be a version of perfect for you where failure is a part of the process in that aspiration. And, you can have moments where you have a perfect day, quote unquote, where you have you hit everything the way that you wanted to hit it, and you pitch a perfect game, and there are these things to baseball that you can aspire to, but by and large, and especially at the youth level, you're teaching a kid how to process a moment where they didn't accomplish the thing that they set out to accomplish, and their reaction to it. And I used to say this thing to my older son's, what was called double A team, so 7 and 8 year olds. Whereas if you don't believe you're going to hit a ball, you're probably not going to hit it. If you go up there and you don't think you can do this, it's all but impossible to convince the bat somehow that you hit it, or it's going to be blind luck because you're going to swing and the ball may hit your bat, but probably not. If you believe you can, you've given yourself a shot, right? If you believe that you can do this, you do. And so if you just struck out and you now are thinking, oh man, I'm going to strike out again because I just struck out, and this is how I've defined my life is based on this last failure. Again, you're going to perform worse than if you go into this, completely forget what just happened and say, I've got this. Next pitch, I've got this. I believe in this. That's my other favorite saying, I think, within baseball is next pitch. Immediately forget the thing that you just did. If you just hit a home run, that's amazing. Doesn't matter anymore. What's the next pitch? You've got to move on always to the next thing. It doesn't mean that you can't celebrate your moments and celebrate your wins, but you have to have that mentality that you're only defined by the thing that you are going to do next, because it just gives you that freedom.
And how you balance with your perfection-driven mindset as a coach, and then you have these little guys who obviously try their best, but do you push them to perfection, or how you balance your own winner mindset with them?
It's hard. I mean, it's harder than people let on, and harder than I think I let on. Is like I get to watch this evolution because I'm the president of our Little League now. I get to watch this evolution across all these different divisions, and now I'm in the second highest division, but I oversaw the highest division last year, and it's interesting to see. Like the highest division is probably the least like competitive at the coaching level, which you would think would be the opposite, right? That like that's where you'd be the most competitive and people are the most on edge, and like the kids can handle it maybe a little bit better then. But no, like this is, like, think back on the things that you've kept doing in your life. Did you ever keep doing one because someone yelled at you? You know, like you keep doing it because someone encouraged you and because you found joy in it, and you keep kind of pulling that string. And it's the same thing for kids, right? Like our rookie team, you'd be amazed at how many kids for T-ball, like the youngest division, people are like trying to keep track of score, and you know, nobody gets out. It doesn't matter, but people start to get like a little, like the fangs start to come out a little bit, like, why can't you do this? Why can't you do that? And none of those kids come back that have that interaction with their parents that are like, you didn't do this, or you're not good enough, or whatever. Like they don't want, they have a million choices in life at that age. Like you can do a million other things. Why go back to this thing that does not bring them happiness? And so, you know, I think you have to be competitive. You can't be completely, you know, apathetic, because it is a game. You're trying to win a game, and you're trying to beat the other team. But focusing on team and focusing on what you can teach the kids, and that is like where you have to find your own reward as a coach, not in your wins and losses. And it's easy. Like you find yourself like, oh man, that other coach is a dick, and I just want to beat him so badly. And like when it doesn't happen, you're like, shit, these kids let me down. You know, like it's hard not to find those, you know, subconscious thoughts of like what you want to do and why, you know, what you're analyzing as a coach as to like how you could have won and should have won. But you have to find the ability to remind yourself that that's not, you know, one, what it's all about, but then two, that's not the success metric. The success metric comes from like, did this kid have a good time? Are they coming back next season? Did they get better?
And what's your, how you comfort the when the game is lost? Like how you address the team?
You know, I think it's very important to talk through things. I like to hear from the kids kind of first, and you know, we talk about the next pitch mentality, but there is value in reflection, you know, at that level, in my opinion, to like, I like to sit with the kids, say like, what did you see? What worked? What didn't work? Like you tried a bunch of stuff out there, and what did you learn? Because especially like they're learning about thinking of baseball. Baseball is like a very intellectual sport. It requires an education. When a ball is hit, there's a million different machinations of what could happen. If there's a runner on second, do you throw the ball to third? Do you try and throw the ball to first? Do you tag him? What do you like? There's all these different rules and nuances to the sport that they're learning about. And so that's kind of like the first layer for me is like, okay, what happened in that game that we can learn from that we can apply to the next game, or we can apply to that next pitch. So, you know, when that ball got hit to center field, I threw it to first base, I should have thrown it to second base. Or, you know, when I was up on a 3-0 count, I swung and I popped the ball up, and maybe I should have given the pitcher a pitch and then had more time to get the pitch that I wanted to hit. Or whatever those things are, like I like to go through that, use it as a learning experience. And then more often than not, it just becomes like, let me get your head right now. Okay, that happened. That's in the past. Are we going to work to get better? Yes, we are. Okay, what are we going to work at to get better now? Okay, we should work at hits to the outfield, or we should work at, you know, we should get more plate appearances. Okay, I'll see you guys at the next practice. We got it. You're going to be okay. Move on to the next one. You know, it's kind of a motivational more than anything.
What has been the most significant trauma in your professional life, and what did you learn out of it?
I think a lot of it came within Jash. There's like somebody backing up right now. We are at a Little League field. Jash was a moment for me of shifting from being a producer to being an executive and being a founder, for that matter. And I remember there was a moment where because the three founders were producers by all means. Like Doug DeLuca, producer on Jimmy Kimmel Live. Daniel Kellison had been a producer of so many different shows. Crank Yankers, The Man Show, Jimmy Kimmel Live, David Letterman, all these great shows. And then myself. And I've been executive and I've been within Maker Studios, but largely like my focus was still production. I understood the business side of it because I was learning it, but it was not like I had never raised money before or done anything like that or managed, cash flow. And when I came in, we had I think it was like $4 million that we had gotten from YouTube to start Jash. And that was all allocated. It was a production contract. It was like we had to go produce a bunch of stuff. And so we had produced those things, but in the background had formed a company and like we're doing all this stuff. And that program was ending. It became clear that they weren't going to re-up, the initiative. And so the question became like, are we going to keep going as a company or are we done? Like, do we execute the production company and we're done? And it was kind of obvious to me that like, no, we got to keep going. Like this thing, there's a lot of possibilities to this and like we can do so much more. And like I believe in the mission of this. And so there was a moment where our controller, Natalie, who oversaw all of our, finances, de facto like CFO, was like, hey, I can't get anyone else's attention on this. Like we're running out of money. Like, can you help me like get people to understand this and create action around this? And it was terrifying because I had left Maker Studios, which was a great, paying job and was on its own rocket ship and was about to get acquired for $1 billion from Disney and was now on this thing that like had no money. And this was like my livelihood. I need to have a paycheck to pay for my mortgage. And I had a kid, who was I think 2 or 3 years old at the time and about to have my second. And it was a real moment of like, oh shit, like what have I done here? And very like, stressful in the moment. And at the same time, like rose a little bit from the ashes of that like fight or flight moment to fight and said, all right, well, how much money do we have left? And like, how much money can we make? And what's the easiest ways for us to make money right now? And what are the things that are going to tip us in that direction, and just created action items around that with the other people that were involved and huddled the people that needed to be in these different conversations, and had to let people go and go through was a very tough process for it being my first time to really like have a round of layoffs. Was not a thing that I had come accustomed to. And what does that mean? And like, how much time do we have to pay people? And like, what are the things that we have to do legally that are right here? What are the things we have to do morally that are right for these people? And it was incredibly like traumatic, but also I think in a good way, like pushed me into a moment of like, all right, no, I understand this now. I understand what this game of business is, and I want to avoid this moment at all costs. And so what do we have to do? And I definitely had other moments where we had to let people go. I definitely have like had other moments where there was not money in the bank that we thought was going to be there and had to take on bridge loans and like go down the entrepreneur's journey. But it continues. That moment continues to shape how I envision a company. Like, 'cause there was also a moment within that we're looking at our office space and looking at all these different things that we can afford, and that the biggest question that started to come back to my mind was like, well, what is, at the time, Jash? I was like, what is Jash? Is it this office? Is Jash all these people here? Is Jash like, my salary? Is Jash like, what makes Jash? And like, Jash can exist whether any of us work in the same place. Jash can exist whether I'm a part of it or whether these other people are a part of it. Jash in theory is a mission. It's a concept. And that was also a very liberating moment. And even now as I'm starting to build on to kind of my next things, I think it's a very comforting thing. Like I've been working at things in the background for 2 years, not needing to have an office, not needing to have it be a funded exercise as much as like, let me find people that identify with this mission that I care about and can keep moving this thing forward.
And what were the most perfect moments at Group 9 outside the winning an Oscar?
Yeah, I think, Group 9 was formed on this notion that, it's better to do this together than apart. And so there's all these different brands that came together and said like, hey, let's pool our resources here and build something that can, support brands and can help us to grow brands and, deal with the capital raises and things like that in a more thoughtful manner. And Discovery was the largest minority investor into Group 9. It really seeded the company's existence, and they donated their digital assets as well. And when I first started, I was I wasn't the president of Group 9 Studios, and I was overseeing intellectual property and all these other things. But on the original programming side, that was kind of separate, and yet we had this great relationship with Discovery, and it was very piecemeal. And it was, if anything, too, like when we would do these deals with Discovery, it was like, hey, we're going to help you out and produce a thing, less than it was like, oh, this is what is good for us and what we want to do. It was more about money, less than about growth. And we went through an exercise as I took over Group 9 Studios that was really like, okay, well, what do we want to do? Like, let's start there. Let's start with like, what is the thing that's right for the company to do? And like, what is our long-term goal? And started to really set that in motion around intellectual property. And we want to, sell shows, but we only want to do it like when the money feels like it's right. Or a little caterpillar just fell off of there. Literally, baby, literally. And so, there was that moment happened, and with Discovery, I had a real like roll up sleeves moment right as they were launching Discovery Plus that said like, hey, here's what we do, here's where our skill sets are, and here's what we're trying to build. Let me understand more about what it is that you're trying to build. And we structured the largest commercial deal between the two companies to go and develop shows. And it also helped us to identify like what is our place in the market and what is the thing that we bring when we're selling a show, and why would people buy shows from us versus buy shows from this production company that's been doing it for 40 years. And I'm very proud of that moment. It took a lot of people to get there, obviously on the Discovery side, on the Group 9 side, on the brand side for us, creative side. And I truly believe that it's the first step towards unlocking a much bigger version of Group 9 Studios and digital production, because so many people, again, it's still based off of like, hey, what's this great concept, and let's go make this thing, and who's the best maker of this thing, and they bring in a production company and they shoot it and then it's done. And nothing you can fully automate in this world, and entertainment's always kind of buffed against this, is like, how do I make the perfect show? And it's like a computer could like tell me all the ways that the data lines up to make this thing perfect. Like, that doesn't exist. There's got to be creativity still at the heart of it. But when it comes to the making of a show, and when it comes to the optimizing of a show, that's a rhythm that no major publisher or platform really has figured out yet. And that is the key to freedom, in my opinion, is like, if you can figure out, okay, here's a concept that you have some conviction over based on the data that you see, like people will be interested in, a community will be interested in this thing. And you can, add intelligence along the production path to say like, hey, we know that people, like, I'm gonna give you an example because this will be easier. The Dodo, one of our brands, produces, animal-centric content, and identified a strand of data that said people really like to watch animals overcoming adversity. And so the creative team got together and developed out a show about animals overcoming adversity called Comeback Kids. That show went up and averaged 40 million views an episode on Facebook. And they're like, yeah, people love watching this thing. Let's keep doing more of that thing. Brought that to Animal Planet and said like, hey, we've got this thing. We want to develop something out longer form. Animal Planet says, hey, our audience, we know them, likes to watch humans more, but like, we understand your perspective on the animals piece of it. Let's make a show about the humans that are helping animals to overcome adversity. And so that show goes up, and it's the largest, global freshman premiere in Animal Planet history, or some, crazy gaudy stats. 1 in every 5, 5 viewers of the show were new to Animal Planet, coming from Dodo and this audience that already existed. From that show, which ran multiple seasons, we've sold now a show that went straight to series for, I think it was like 18 episodes, to Disney in Roman to the Rescue, about a kid who helps dogs get adopted and face their adversity, and a show about this guy Derek Campana called Wizard of Paws. It's now in its like 5th season, about a guy who helps fashion prosthetics for animals. And another show about this girl Izzy, who lives in Australia on a koala sanctuary and helps these koalas rehab and overcome their adversity. It's like that small strand of data allowed so much creativity to happen, but it was also de-risked, right? And now because we also knew that we felt confidence in that data, it makes all of your targeting efforts easier. So I know I can maybe buy a viewer for this show if I needed to. I can advertise to them and make hopefully, $10 off of the advertising I'm going to make to them for the $9 I need to spend to get them, right? Like that game of arbitrage is very real. And so that moment for me of signing that deal with Discovery to say, hey, you have financing and you have a large platform and you're like, merging with Warner now. It's like that being married with what we understand about data science and optimizing and that feedback process unlocks something massive to say, hey, we're going to go make this movie because we have this conviction, and now we're going to market it smarter along the way and be able to optimize for other TV shows or other extensions of the IP. Like that's pretty big.
Can you share a show from the other end of the spectrum which was more risky or intuitive, like didn't have the data to back it up?
Yeah, I mean, not one that we've produced. Everything that we've produced really is come pretty solidly out of data in some direction. I think that we had one show that was kind of brought to us from a network that was kind of a reimagining of Real Sex, that show that used to live on HBO. And it was all right, well, here's like our version of it, and here's what we think people would respond to. And it ultimately just got caught in the crosshairs of a bunch of shows getting the rug pulled out from underneath them. Like we were supposed to start production on a Monday and got a call on a Friday that was like, hey, we're going to pull the plug on the show. And that, I chalk up a little bit too. They're like, all right, well, this wasn't our show. And like, we didn't have a crazy amount of conviction over it, but we did think it lined up with the brand and it helped for all these other, these other things. But yeah, that one failed.
How you see where Hollywood is heading, where we are at the moment, and what trends and quiet signals you are catching?
I mean, what's amazing is it's never been a better time to be a creator. Like there's so many tools out there for you to help you to get to the place that you wanted to get to. When we started Maker, like none of these tools existed. The idea existed, and seeing that come to fruition, where you have people that are making, millions and millions of dollars a month, creating stuff from their house in North Carolina or wherever, and they're making the exact things that they want to make. And like, that's so cool to see. I think that there's still a finance gap between that autonomy and the more ambitious projects that you see on an HBO or you see at the box office, the hundreds of millions of dollars, in that way. And I don't know that social platforms is what's going to get us there, or advertisers, backing a project. Like that's just not the equation doesn't fully check out. And so you still need a financier to get there. And is that financier a studio or is that financier a platform? Like for right now, that's how it kind of currently exists. My hope and my vision for it is like, if I could write the future and if I could have all the resources in the world to go crack the code of it, like the most interesting machination for how something gets financed, if it can ultimately retain ownership in that creator economy and be community based, that's where I think we'll see the most innovative content coming from. And so like Web3 is very, very interesting. And I think that world of DAOs and NFTs, and not NFTs is like, I think it's a word that probably won't even be used in a couple of years. It's an easy way to describe technology right now. But that tokenization within a community to help support that community's efforts, I think stands the ability to challenge traditional finance mechanisms for how content is made. And, I'm hard pressed to think that there'll ever be a version where there's not like a billionaire somewhere that just like spends money and gets behind a movie that they just want to make something, like that will always exist. But I think that there will be a newer, I think that there'll be a newer evolution that will unlock and get rid of this finance gap to say, hey, if you are a creator in, Finland or wherever, and this is the thing that you want to see, you can tap into a community that can help fund that, which is already kind of there. But these tools that are evolving now make it so much more scalable than like, hey, I'm going to ask my friends and family to like donate through a GoFundMe page. This is now, hey, you can invest in this thing, see real upside in this thing, and be, participating and supporting things that you believe in along the way, as opposed to the power only lying with a bank or with a studio.
What's your advice to young creators who strive for perfection?
There's this Ira Glass quote that I'm going to absolutely butcher, but it's a very long quote. I always like Google it and like read it to people, but it's the general sentiment of it is when you first start out creating, you have an unbelievable taste and you have not honed your craft. And so everything you create, you think sucks. And so the key is basically to just keep creating. And as long as you keep going and you get past those humps, eventually you'll find a moment where your taste aligns with your efforts and your creativity. And if you can get to that point, like the future's kind of yours, right? So that's always my advice is like, if you're creative, just create. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. It will never be perfect. I've watched enough filmmakers, get to this point where they are releasing something or something has to be uploaded and they're making changes up until someone basically yells at them. And those tend to be the best creators, right? Like they're trying to find their own version of perfection for the project that they care about, and it will never be done. And like most creatives get to that point where they start to learn that, and it's very liberating. But it's also like where some of the best stuff I've ever seen comes from, is that like frustration of chasing perfection and never being able to find it. But that's what makes you great. Like that's your taste is what makes you great. It's like you keep chipping away at it. You keep trying to make it better. You keep, iterating and thinking through things, and your gut is what makes you great. So if you're a creator, keep creating, and, go easy on the people that are trying to help you to create, because they understand other parts of the process that are going to allow you to keep doing it. So
if we would create a perfect world, what are the areas that you are kind of on a mission to fix?
I think that representation piece is probably the biggest. Is just I want, especially the larger pieces of content that break through community and algorithms. I want a better representation of the world in which we live, and it's much easier said than done, because especially like just the nature of technology is everything has gotten so customized to who you are, and then what communities you involve yourself in, and what people you follow, and all that kind of stuff. And so it's very hard to have something that breaks through. It's very hard to have these massive movies and TV shows that everyone turns their head and watches. It's much easier to have something that like a specific community watches. And that idea that we've kind of departed from, of these like grandiose things, right? Like a talk show used to reach 80 million people a night. Now it reaches 2 million at best. Like having something that crosses demographics and crosses communities, but is still representative of a world that is not, straight white male, has a heroic journey. Like that's the thing that I'm probably the most passionate about. And that if I could like mold my perfect society, is like having that work very fluidly with the way these communities interact and can support each other. Like that's the dream, right? Like Little League Baseball is fully driven by a community. If you have, your coaches are volunteers, you have, the people who are watching the games, and the parents are putting money into not only registration, but then also into the snack bar where they're going to buy food. That money from the snack bar goes into the league, who then spends it on jerseys. It's like it works completely with some layer of autonomy. And if we can do that within media, that is when things will feel like the closest to perfection.
Thank you for listening to the Talks of Imperfection. The podcast is enabled by Edita Prima, the kindest Nordic tech company that orchestrates automated customer journeys to perfection by turning data friendly. That's all, folks. It was good to have you on board. Please subscribe to the podcast, follow us on Instagram, and hold tight until the next episode.